What's new in Java 23 and why should you care about it? Find out from the best leaders and experts who are closely involved in creating these new Java features and the ones who will help you to use them. In today's episode of JEP Explained, we'll cover JEP 477, which is about implicitly declared classes and instance main method. So, what about it? If you have ever written main method in Java as public static void main, passing it a string array, know that it is changing. Why? How? And how does that impact you? And this is exactly what we'll find out today. Get ready to discover what you have been missing all these years. And to do that, we have with us today Ken Fogel. Hey Ken, it's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you for inviting me. I've enjoyed Java for most of my career, and I just love talking about it.
So let me quickly introduce Ken. Ken is handsome, overachiever, and a great person to work with. And let me add some more details. Ken has worked with Dawson College for over 31 years in multiple roles. He's been department chairman, program coordinator of the computer science technology program, research scholar in residence, longtime professor with 21 years of experience of teaching Java. So you're talking with the best today. He's also a Java champion, conference organizer of the famous Champions Conference. He's also a JCP Executive Committee Member. Ken, there are a lot of other achievements, but I have shortened it so that we can talk more about the topic today.
Sounds good. Maybe on another session, we can just spend the whole time talking about everything I've done.
Sounds good. And pleasure to have you with us today and to talk about this topic. And yes, hi everyone. I'm your host, Mala Gupta. So, Ken, let me start with the topic today, which is about the implicitly declared classes and instance main method. So, until now, all Java developers they coded the main method in their first Hello World class and other initial classes as public static void main string arguments. And this step is changing it to void main. So, my first question to you is as an educator, did you often have to start talking about main method in your classes as please ignore the keywords public static void, string args? We'll revisit that later. And are you excited about the change?
Well, you've also left out the other part of the decoration, which is public class, give it a name, and now you have to explain camel case, and along with public static void main. In my beginners classes, and I typically worked with students who were between the ages of 17 and 20. And it was very much this is something you're going to have to write, but I'm not going to tell you what it means. Not yet. It doesn't impact where we begin with. And I could see the frustration in my students in that they were typing stuff in. They really, what's that static thing? And void, is this science fiction? And what does it all mean? And you're saying, no. If you want to print, hello moose, you just need this stuff. And so I'm excited to have most of that eliminated.
That sounds good because, as you said, when folks are asked to write something which they do not understand, that kind of makes them a little bit frustrated, and that would probably have a lot of folks as well, like not wanting to do coding in that language. Is that so? Did you hear anything like that as well?
Well, no, that's never the case because they haven't come to me from other languages. So it's not like somebody's been writing in C. Mind you, C is a little simpler. So they have no idea what a language looks like. It's all about, why is the instructor making me do something and not telling me why or what? It's like, just do it. Never mind. That, I think, is what bothers them, not a comparison to other things they've learned.
So that's good. So this JEP talks about the implicitly declared classes. So how does it work behind the scenes? And I mean, what happens when you create a source code file with a main method but no class declaration?
Well, what's happening is the compiler is creating the implicit class for you. It has no name, which means you cannot refer to code in this file because without a class name, you can't create an instance of the object or talk with it. But when someone is starting out, the first class is not about using 12 different objects and having the students create all these classes. You're beginning by looking at the structure of the language, the syntax. And so much of these decorations which support whether it's functional or object oriented aren't needed up front.
That makes sense because there was also a talk about programming in the large and programming in the small. So what you just mentioned, we don't need programming in the large when we are talking about introducing a new
Mhm.
language to the students. Don't need to have components which are interacting with each other. We're looking at the smaller concepts. So with that, the other question I have is this step also talks about the instance main method. And until now, we have been used to working with the static main method. So, what is the difference and what does the instance main method mean?
Well, what's happening now is the compiler is taking the responsibility for instantiating the object. It used to be under public static void main. Typically, the first line of code was to instantiate the object and then call some method in it. Well, now that's no longer required, so that main can be another method with the rest of the boys and girls in your program, and you can immediately interact with the other methods and the class variables and in that file without the need to introduce new right away in your teaching especially.
That's right. And since we know that all this code has to be defined in a source code file, and let's say the name of my source code file is animate text. So when the compiler would create the implicit class, the class name would be the same as the name of the source code file. So that's interesting as well.
Exactly, though in my understanding the name is almost meaningless because it cannot be referred to in other
Yes.
files.
Right, but compiler would have to use some name, so
Mhm.
I think that's the
Yeah.
reason it uses the name of the source code file. And to talk about the other change that we have in Java 23, and this was not included in the previous version of this change. So now the implicitly declared classes, they can automatically import three static methods for simple textual IO with the console. So now we also have a new top level class, which is java.io.io, interesting name, which has three methods, which is print, println, and readln. So now we no longer need system.out.println to output anything to console. We can use println and then whatever we want to output. So, what is your opinion? Because I assume a lot of folks would ask you, how many lines does it take to print something to console in Java?
Well, certainly it's exciting because that system dot out dot or system dot in dot is again introducing complexity that you're telling the students, I'm not going to tell you what that means. Right? That'll come week 6, right? Eventually. And again, another point of frustration for somebody learning the language. So having print line, but I got to tell you, I'm more excited about the read because you can include a prompt. Pretty much every other language out there has an input that includes a prompt, and Java always forced you to do a print, to do an out before an in. And now that they're combined, we've regained the simplicity that other languages have had.
Right, and I think a lot of programmers, when they get started, they would need some input from the console so that that could be processed in their program, and that could be printed to the console. So that really makes it simple for them to do that.
Exactly. You've gone from two lines to one line. And as an individual who practices laziness on a full-time basis, one less line of
Mhm.
code is exciting.
Yes, that makes sense. Also, it's more about the flow that you are in. You just want to read line and you just want to
Mhm.
print line without having to kind of think about the other complexities or other things that you want to import. It's already there, automatically imported. So that makes life easier as well for new programmers, I guess.
I do want to make a little plug here because they
Mhm.
almost got it right. The read line, of
Mhm.
course, only returns a string. It would be nice if we had reads that returned numbers. Hopefully, we can
Right.
convince them to add that for the next JEP.
Ping, ping, Brian. Okay, so the next change that I want to talk about, and I think that's an interesting change, is automatically importing on demand all of the public top level classes and the interfaces of the packages exported by the Java.base module. You'll have to explain that line to anyone who's watching it.
Well, the Java, the runtime is full of this range of amazing libraries available to you. And up until this introduction of nameless classes, it was necessary to start teaching imports. Import this, import that, and so on. I can remember when I would teach students Java who came from the C language. Okay, well, instead of an include, you're going to say import. And there was a connection that could be made. But it's an obvious question. Why do I have to import something that is I'm going to need, that is widely used? And so, with this new approach, you can do it explicitly, import java.base. I believe you don't even have to say that. And you get all 54 classes available in Java base, ready for you to use your code right away. Whether it's, converting strings to numbers, when I complained about readline, um, or dealing with, manipulating lists using certain collections. They're all there for you. And we don't have to, as a teacher, introduce, oh, well, you have to explicitly say, I need this library if I want to do, certain math functions, or, other libraries to do what should be just standard. I should just be able to write it, right? Why do I have to import NIO? Just let me talk to the file. The code is there in the runtime. Why do I have to ask for it?
That makes a lot of sense. Another step to make it easier for new developers to write their
Mhm.
code and focus on what they need rather than focusing on the ceremony.
Exactly. I like that term, ceremony.
Okay. So my next question is about, so we talked about the details of what this chip brings to the developers and the educators. I want to talk about the bigger picture now. Why do you think this change is important? Are we talking about reducing the cognitive complexity for the students? I want to know your perspective as an educator.
Well, my feeling is the reason we write code is to solve problems. And so, generally you take a problem, you deconstruct it, and now you want to turn it into code. And for somebody starting out, it can be, I use this term probably too often, overwhelming to include, as you said, ceremonies, decorations. Let me just have a loop. Let me just have an if. I don't want to have to deal with, oh, well, I've got to package that in a function, a method, a class. We write code to solve problems. And to me, that's the most important skill as a developer, more so than the specific language. And so this new approach allows someone like myself in the classroom to focus on, the core syntax and problem solving rather than all the things the language makes me do.
That makes so much sense because Ken, when we get started with learning any language, the things that we do in the beginning are very basic, like assigning values to variables or
Mhm.
playing with the flow control or things like that, which has a lot of potential because even when I play with the flow control, I have the sequence, iteration, and conditions. I could do a lot of things. I don't need to know about the bigger picture of how Java components
Mhm.
interact with each other, and I think that that is one of the most beautiful thing. Focus on getting a strong flow control and logic building uh, in place, and then move to the other parts of the language.
Absolutely. There's no question that architecture is important, and that's where a lot of
Mhm.
this decoration supports.
Mhm.
But that
Mhm.
shouldn't be the first couple lectures, right?
Yes.
It's like, you're going to build a house, but we're going to spend 3 weeks explaining how a brick is built. No, I just want to use a brick and build a house.
Right. Makes sense. Um, so the other, should I say, the obvious question is, do folks come and talk with you about complaining about how many lines does Java need to just output a string onto the console? Um, how does that change with this feature now?
Well, when I've taught students, especially students who've had no background in any language, it's hard to complain about something when you don't know what the alternatives are. So, if anything, it's like, oh, okay, if I have to do it in X number of lines, I will. Why isn't it shorter? But okay, that's what I have to do. And that's the issue I've seen in the classroom, where again, students see complexity in everything, and something as simple as asking for input requiring one output line and then input, there's a complexity that they don't understand, or they don't see the rationale behind it. They've never seen a language before. So this new approach simplifies this, and we come back to, you want input, here's a prompt, and you'll get a response. It's one line. um, you don't need to instantiate yourself with new and main. It's ready to go. And we come back to, let's focus on problem solving and the core syntax of pretty much every programming language, whether it's sequence flow, control, iteration. That's what's important at the beginning, not the packaging.
Makes sense. So, does this new feature introduce a separate tool chain, and are the students required to use separate tools to compile and run their code, or are we on the same set of tools that we have been using all these years?
So one of the goals of this, and you can see this in the JEP documentation, is not to change the tool chain. That they do not want to create a separate dialect of the Java language. So it's the same old, you can, say Java C and then, Java and run it the way anybody would do from the command line. IDEs, such as the amazing IDE from IntelliJ, are, I'm not sure if you can tell me now if it's ready to handle JEP 477, but I know they will, and yours will. And that's exciting that we can just, again, get down to problem solving and not, oh, I got to learn 3 different ways to run a Java program. No, we shouldn't need to do that anymore.
Right. And to answer your question, yes, IntelliJ does handle 477. The last changes that came in 477, we are still working on that one. But the previous two versions, they've already been covered. The changes which were introduced in 21, Java 21 and 22, they're already in the IDE. So a little bit of changes which have to go in the IDE, and then we're all set for 23.
Cool.
Um, so coming on to the next question. So we talk about a lot of, so we know that there are many cool new Java features coming in Java right now. And combination of many of these features is interesting and helpful, such as when we talk about data-oriented programming, record, sealed classes, and pattern matching. When they work together, it's absolutely amazing to work work with them for data-oriented programming. For this feature, what other Java features do you think they work really well with?
That's an interesting question. When you use the word data-oriented programming, I've always believed that all programming is data-oriented, right? That, if you're teaching a language, the first thing, even before you deal with what a loop is or anything else, is examining data. In the classroom, I would take ads from Amazon. I would take the stickers you find on appliances that describe its energy consumption and how it compares to the competitors. And in our, an early class, we would identify what is the data type of all of the elements in there. Let's focus on data first and then how we're going to operate on it. When I learned programming back in the 80s, it was the other way around. First, you thought of what you wanted to do, and then you decided what you were going to do it on. The new enhancements, the items you mentioned, finally makes thinking about data. How are you going to package it? The record is just amazing in terms of simplification. That to me is a significant enhancement to the language, and is where I think a lot of instructors will begin their teaching, right? Even before we talk about a class, let's talk about a record, for instance.
That's interesting. And when we were talking earlier, you also mentioned about launching multiple files, and you also mentioned that feature works really well with this feature. So, do you want to talk about that as well?
Well, certainly, we have the JEP, and you can, I believe it's 458. I have trouble with the numbers, they change weekly. But, what's exciting there is initially there was the single file launch. So that was nice. You'd say Java, the name of your file, and using, the implied classes. That worked great. But it kind of restricted you. And so now with the multi-file, you can begin with, okay, let's learn some syntax, and then we get, talk about data. So we can have a record class. And that record class, that separate file, can now be part of that simple launch, that we don't have to start dealing with build tools or other things to be able to include multiple classes. Got to be careful you don't, there comes a point where you do need a tool to manage. But initially, if we stay with this data oriented approach, yeah, the idea that I can introduce records and using that same tool chain, start using that, excites me.
Absolutely. And again, another step to reduce the ceremony for getting started and running programs.
Absolutely.
The other question I wanted to ask you is, I'm not sure whether you had an opportunity to actually work with this feature with your students, because I wanted to ask how, or if you haven't, how do you think it would help you to introduce more concepts to the students gradually? I'm looking at the introduction of subroutines to the students without having to talk about classes. Do you think that's where it would be helpful to educators?
Absolutely. So I have not yet had the opportunity to use these features in the class spaces. As I said, I've retired from full-time teaching, though I'm still a part-time instructor in continuing education here at Concordia University. I usually teach one course a year, and usually the first level course. So I'm excited about that. I'm excited about, and I've always been a strong believer in structured programming. Um, I still am fond of Pascal. Uh, so, that is where I believe we begin. That, we're doing problem solving. What are the steps in solving the problem? And each step belongs in a method. In when I was teaching and when I still teach, I look at students' code and I say, okay, let's count the number of things you do in a method. And anytime the number goes beyond one, I need they have to explain to me why. And obviously it's never just one, but I want the students to focus on that. And with this new approach where we're not worried about classes, we're not worried about news, imports, all these other things. Oh, I want to use this. Oh, I forgot that import. I can, begin their, evolution towards object oriented or true functional programming with our simple methods, and let's start dividing the solution into pieces. And I think that will simplify it. And, I'm looking forward to using this in the classroom because I think we can get more done sooner if I don't have to keep saying, no, ignore that, ignore that. Oh, new, don't worry about it. You just need to do it. No, let's get rid of that.
That makes a lot of sense because then you can also talk about refactoring to the students in
Mm-hmm.
how you can just modify the parameters that you are passing to a method and call the same method. And I think for me it was an aha moment when I was learning how to program. It's like, oh my god, I can pass different arguments to a method, and it would do the same thing for me. Of course, the process, the calculations would be same. So yes. Um, Introducing new concepts one step at a time. So that makes a lot of sense.
That's it exactly.
Mhm.
And not, again, being overwhelmed by other
Mhm.
things that have to be there.
Yes. Mhm. Um, so my last question for you for this interview is: do you think this feature is only helpful for new Java developers, or do you think it would be helpful for experienced developers as well?
The whole idea behind this is to make it simple for someone to start. So I think we've established that's the case. But now, as a an experienced developer, there are sometimes I just want to explore some new aspect of the language, right? And granted, I'm probably using an IDE like IntelliJ that will help me, but just sometimes I just want to get out that old text editor and let's put some code in and just do Java and the name of the file and see how it works. And that's what excites me about this, even for the experienced programmer. I know that J Shell was has always been in my mind something for the experienced developer to be able to try out something. I just never thought they got it right. I think this gets it right in terms of allowing you to explore aspects of the language quickly.
And since you mentioned J Shell, so I just wanted to have a follow up question. Do you think there are good alternates to executing small programs now for students, maybe?
There's an interesting problem we have. We know that other languages are available in things like the Jupyter notebooks for the language named after a snake. And there are other tools out there. And, I hear whispers of tools like that for Java in the education system. And I see this, my daughter is a high school teacher, a science teacher. And it's interesting, the school she teaches at, their computer teacher is a former student of mine. And you see the frustration in that, the lack of technical support. So something as simple as, oh, we need the latest version of Java installed on all the school computers is sometimes just not possible to do, right? It's like, well, we put Java 8 on 6 years ago, so that's good enough forever. And we don't have the manpower, the budget, the funding. So we desperately need some way to allow a student, either from their phone, from their tablet, from their Chromebook, from whatever they have, regardless of whether it's the latest Intel, AMD, or Qualcomm CPU, they can start learning the language. And I know that's something that I'm trying to promote within the community, that we need these types of tools so that just the idea of telling somebody, well, you have to go and download Java. Well, I look at a lot of people I know who use computers, and when you say you have to download a program, they look at me like I'm crazy, right? It's like, no, I just open up my browser and I go and do it, right? It's a browser universe. So we need browsers, or we need websites, places where I can point my browser at it and write code, keep my code on their servers in the cloud. Because again, in school situations, frequently there's no way for a student to preserve their work locally. I guess if they have a USB key, but let me create an account. Let me have some storage space in some cloud system and let me write Java on anything.
Right. So I guess there are both advantages and disadvantages of doing that. But
Mhm.
we really hope that someone's listening. And I do think there are solutions for that, but I think not so popular or not so mature, I guess. But let's see. Let's hope it happens soon.
Yeah, let's hopefully people who listen to this will start telling us about it and we can
Yes.
help publicize it.
That makes sense. On that note, we're done with the serious questions, and now I have two fun sections for you. The first one is a tongue twister. So I'll
Mm.
display on your screen a tongue twister, which you have to say out aloud. You cannot be slow in saying that because then you would win on in this round, which I don't want. No, that's not the case. But still, so we have your tongue twister on the screen now.
Inconceivably intricate implicit instances in multiple main methods make meticulous maintenance monstrously mind-mangling.
That's not done. You aced it in the first attempt.
Well,
So full point.
part of the problem is these are words I've used in my teaching. So it's not like I'm seeing them for the first time. You've got to give me a tongue twister based on, I don't know, calculus. I never liked calculus. That I'd
Uh,
stumble on.
so point noted. So you'll have that on in our next interview or the next series that we have. So the next section is enacting emojis. So you would see on your screen a couple of statements,
Yeah,
and for
yeah,
each of
comfy.
those statements, yeah. So
Mhm.
on each of for each of those statements, you'll have to react using an emoji. You cannot type out that emoji. You have to enact that. So I have three for you, and this is the first one. Java 23 is about to be released.
Oh, I got to get it right here. I got to figure out my
Yes.
camera. Whoops, I keep going the wrong way. Let's do it this way. There we go.
Yes.
Let's see how many
So,
people recognize this particular gesture from a popular computer game.
right. So, I know that you have organized conferences for your college in the past, and now you are organizing J Champions. So, organizing a conference is fun. You'll have to explain that.
Oh, well, those are called jazz hands in the entertainment world. You see them in musicals and stuff. They're used to imply excitement.
Okay. Organizing a conference is fun for you.
Oh,
I
absolutely. I don't do things unless they're fun. That's why I'm here today.
Wow. That's so kind of you. So the last one is because I know you are a pro at photography. So this is click and shoot cam. Yes. So there's the famous camera. So click and shoot cameras are better than DLSR cameras. So your reaction.
If we assume the modern phone is really the current click and shoot, what I like about them and my image is I don't have to look anymore. The camera's taking care of everything for me.
Wow.
And as we
So
talked
they.
earlier, I drive a car that has a self-driving feature. And so for the first
Mhm.
time in my life, when I go up to a cottage about 100 kilometers from Montreal, I can be driving and I can look out the window because the
Wow.
car is keeping me in the lane and keeping me away from everybody else. And so I see this now, whether it's phone based cameras or even cameras point and shoots from Canon and other companies. They take care of the framing. They make sure things are in the right place, the exposure, they fix the color balance. Uh, it's really difficult to take a bad picture. If anything, it's harder to take a bad picture than a good picture.
Wow. So that means click and shoot cameras are definitely catching up, and they are.
Absolutely.
Oh. I love that. Now I no longer have to be embarrassed about my not so great photography skills, and I can say, "Oh, I'm using a good phone."
Exactly.
So on that note, Ken, it was such a fun and lots of fun and a pleasure to talk with you about this, Jeb. Thank you so much for your opinions and your answers. It was great. It was great. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I enjoy any opportunity I have to talk with you. We've had some fun at conferences together, and I look forward to
Mhm.
possibly doing this again in the future.
Thank you so much. So, everyone watching, Java is indeed a great language for developers. It has a lot of features, it's secure, it performs extremely well, and it finds its application and benefits, offers benefits across the industry. And I hope with this change, it remains or becomes the preferred or the first programming language of choice for new developers. And on that note, stay tuned for our next episode. Bye.